Let's go straight into the talk, which is by Dr. Kanishka Ukuwela, who is a senior lecturer in zoology at the Department of Biological Sciences in the Faculty of Applied Sciences, Rajaratnam University of Sri Lanka. Now, his doctorate was on evolutionary biology, concerning the systematics, evolution, and biogeography of viviparous sea snakes of the Indo-Pacific. So he is interested in understanding the diversity, origins, and patterns and processes of speciation in the South Asian herpetofauna. And he does this by using traditional morphology, molecular phylogenetics, and population genetics as tools to answer the questions that have come up. So without more ado, I will invite Dr. Ukuwela to make his presentation. Kanishka, you're on.
I suppose most of you can hear me. So first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Malik Fernando and the Sri Lanka Natural History Society for inviting me to deliver this talk. Lizards have always fascinated me since my childhood, so I'm always excited to talk about reptiles as well as lizards. So having said that, let's get on with the talk. So, okay, right. Give me a second. My computer is, oh, all right. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is what are lizards, right? So all of us know that lizards, I suppose most of you at least, know what that lizards are reptiles, right? So when you look at reptiles, the reptiles are grouped into 5 orders, right? So all the living reptiles today are grouped into 5 orders. They are the orders Testudines, Squamata, Rhynchocephalia, and Crocodilia. So the lizards actually belong to the order Squamata along with snakes. So the order Squamata, or the squamates, the organisms that belong to the order Squamata, are characterized by the presence of having bodies covered by horny scales or shields, and they also have a movable quadrate bone, right? So don't worry about this. This is a particular bone that's found in the upper jaw. So it's movable compared to other reptilians. So there are about 11,000 species of lizards, and they're found all over the world except Antarctica. And according to the fossil evidence, they seem to have a transit origin. Okay, right. So what I have here is a picture of the evolutionary relationships of squamates. So there are about 5 distinct lineages, actually 5 distinct lineages of lizards. And among them, you also have the lineage that includes the snakes. So what this tree, the evolutionary tree is telling you is that snakes are actually lizards that have secondarily lost their limbs through evolution, right? Snakes have also developed several other adaptations for their mode of life. As a result, snakes are quite distinct from lizards. So if someone asks me, then what are the differences between lizards and snakes? How do you define a lizard, or how do you distinguish a lizard from a snake? So people would definitely say, okay, the presence of lizards, presence of limbs in lizards, and then snakes don't have limbs, right? It's partly correct, but the issue is there are lizards that have also that also don't have limbs, right? So I have tabulated certain characters that are comparable between lizards and snakes. Right? So if you look at the limbs, of course, there are lizards with limbs, as well as there are lizards that have also lost their limbs. So snakes, of course, do not have limbs at all, except for pythons and certain other snakes that have tiny limb buds, right? Limb buds, but then the snakes do not have any like highly visible limbs at all. Right? So if you look at the body shape, then lizards could have elongated bodies or maybe stout or squat bodies, but then snakes will always have elongated bodies. And then if you look at the eyelids, lizards either have movable or fixed eyelids, but then if you look at snakes, they have no eyelids at all. And also the scales. Lizard scales are overlapping, or they could be also lizards with non-overlapping scales like geckos. Snakes will always have overlapping scales. And if you look at the external ear opening, some of the lizards have a visible external ear opening, and some of them do not have. So snakes do not have an external ear opening at all. And then if you look at the pelvic and the pectoral girdles, the lizards will have pelvic as well as the pectoral girdle. Snakes, some of the snakes like the pythons will have a pectoral girdle, right? So that is what the limb buds that we see actually in pythons are the vestiges of the pelvic girdle. And if you look at the lungs, right, you won't see this externally, but lizards have two lungs. Snakes only have only one functional lung, and the other lung is extremely reduced and it's non-functional. So these are some of the characters that can be used to distinguish snakes and lizards. So you have to look at a combination of characters to say whether it's a snake or a lizard. Right. So let's move to reptiles of Sri Lanka. When it comes to reptiles, Sri Lanka is blessed, right? We have 241 species of reptiles, and it's counting. Like 2 weeks ago, 2 new species of geckos came out, right? So among these 241 species, 156 species are found only in this country. So that's about 65% endemic. And the reptiles of Sri Lanka are represented by the orders Testudines, Squamata, and Crocodilia. Right? So we have 2 species of crocodiles, 9 species of Testudines. So Testudines include turtles and tortoises, and then of course 230 species of squamates. So when it comes to the squamates of Sri Lanka, so we have 122 species of lizards and 108 species of snakes. So let's dive into the topic that I'm supposed to talk about today, the diversity of lizards in Sri Lanka. So in this talk, I'll be first talking about the diversity of lizards in Sri Lanka, and then recent studies that have been conducted on the origins and the evolution of lizards in Sri Lanka, and then of course certain studies on the natural history of Sri Lanka, right? Natural history of the lizards of Sri Lanka. And then, of course, bit about the threats to the lizards of Sri Lanka. So that is basically the structure of my talk. So let's talk about the diversity of lizards in Sri Lanka. Right? So if you look at the diversity, we have 21 species of dragon lizards, 1 species of chameleon, and 62 species of geckos. That is the most diverse group of reptiles in Sri Lanka, and 2 species of wall lizards, and 34 species of skinks or hicanolas, and 2 species of monitor lizards. So that those are the Kabarugoyas and the Thalagoyas. So altogether we have 122 species. Right, so let's look at the diversity of these lizards in a little more detail. So I will basically be visiting each of these family and talking about their some unique characteristics and then certain other aspects. Right, so let's look at the dragon lizards or the family Agamidae. So we have 21 species in Sri Lanka, of which 19 are found only in this country, and 3 genera, Ceratophora, Cophotis, and Lyriocephalus, are only found in Sri Lanka. So that means these genera have actually evolved within the island, right? So right, so let's look at the genus Calotus, right? So most of you must be familiar with these lizards. The one we have in the left, the green one, with the red head, Calotus calotus, or the green garden lizard, and then of course Calotus versicolor, which is very common, found almost all over the island except in the highest elevations. So these two are the commonest of the two Calotus species in Sri Lanka. So we have 9 species. I'm only showing you the 2 common ones. Of the 9 species, 7 are endemic to this country. So these 2 species are actually not endemic to this country. They're also found in India, right? At least for now. Right. So let's look at the genus Ceratophora. So the genus Ceratophora is unique among lizards in Sri Lanka because almost all of them, except one species, almost all of them have a unique appendage in front of the snout, right? So we call this a rostral appendage. So some of them have a rhino horn-like appendage, like the Ceratophora sodati, which I have here, and then of course the leaf-like appendage in Ceratophora tenanti. So we have 6 species of them, right? There's 3 more of them. So all 6 species are restricted to the wet zone of the country. So most of them are found in the lowland rainforests of Sri Lanka, while 2 species, the Stodati and Tenantia, are found in the submontane and montane forests of the highlands of Sri Lanka. So very cool looking lizards. Right, so and then we have a genus called Cophotis. Again, this genus, just like Ceratophora, is found only in this country. These species, there's only 2 species of them. One restricted to the central highlands, including Norelia, Horton Plains, Haggala, that area. And then another species, Cophotis dumbara, is found only in the Knuckles range. And both species are found at elevations about 1,200 meters minimum, right? So they are extremely sensitive to temperature and also the humidity. So unique among the Sri Lankan lizards is that they have a prehensile tail, right? So they can wrap their tails around the branches that they're living on. So this is one of the unique features among the dragon. This genus only has that particular feature among the dragon lizards. And another interesting feature is that among the lizards in Sri Lanka, of all lizards, they are the only ones who are viviparous, I would say, correct that, ovoviviparous, right? So what I mean by that is they retain their eggs inside the female, inside the mother, and then they deliver fully developed young. From the mother actually delivers fully developed young while they are on the trees itself, right? This is what we call ovoviviparity. So these are the only lizards to have ovoviviparity in Sri Lanka. So it seems like this evolved independently within this particular genus as an adaptation to cold climates. So because these are found only in cold climates, so incubation would be a problem for these extremely slow moving lizards. So probably there are other lizards that are sharing the same habitat, but they're more mobile compared to these lizards. So I'm just making I'm just hypothesizing that probably the reason for evolution of ovoviviparity in these lizards could be as an adaptation to cold climate, as well as living in extremely arboreal habits, right? So these are found, they are completely arboreal lizards, right? And then we have this really pretty lizard of the genus Lyrocephalus. So there's only 1 species in this genus, so we call this a monotypic genus. Again, the genus is endemic to Sri Lanka. And then these guys are characterized by the presence of a fruit-like appendage, right, around a hump-like appendage right on the snout, right? And they also have these structures right above the eyes, which we call the canthal ridges. Really pretty lizards. And then they are also they do this unique behavior. Like when they are threatened, they open their mouths, which are extremely red colored. So that's a type of thread display that they do to to avoid probably predation and also to scare away the, predators. So these are again found only in the wet zone of Sri Lanka and a few places in the intermediate zones in the island. So they are found. They're mostly forest lizards. Occasionally wander into home gardens right adjacent to forests. So found in the humid forests as well as lowland rainforests and some mountain forests of Sri Lanka. And then we have these unique looking lizards, which we call kangaroo lizards. So we have two species in Sri Lanka. So one found only in the dry zone, Autocryptis nigristima, and then the other one only in the wet zone, Autocryptis weigmani. So the lizards of this genus is characterized by these gula sac or the extensible extensible region of skin right in front of the in the chest and right under the snout, right under the lower jaw, right. So this feature is only seen in males. The females do not have that. So it's what we see is that they use it mostly for mostly to attract females and as also to threaten other rival males. I'll talk about that later on. Right? So and then we also have a similar looking lizard, the sitanas. So we have two species in Sri Lanka. Only one of them is endemic. So again, just like the kangaroo lizards, these lizards also have an extensible flap of skin right underneath their snout, extending up to the chest. So again, both display the I mean, that is only found in males, and males display it again to attract females as well as ward off rival males. So these are found along the coastal regions in the dry zone of Sri Lanka, and maybe sometimes they might extend their range into the interior of the country, but so far only known from the dry zones of the country. Easy to see, easy to see them in the coastal regions, and they're extremely fast running lizards, very difficult to catch. Right, so now we're done with the dragon lizards. Move on to chameleons. So we have only one species of chameleon. So the chameleons resemble dragon lizards, but then they are unique. Is that unique among the lizards in the world by having independently movable eyes, right? And then they also have zygodactyl limbs. What I mean by this is that they have like 3 fingers going forwards and 2 fingers going backwards. And then they also have a highly prehensile tail, and then a tongue that can be extended almost twice the length of their body, which is used to, of course, grab insects. So, and then also their head is fitted with a bony structure. We call it bony casque, right? So there's only one species in Sri Lanka, which is not endemic. It's also shared with India, but the name is Cameleo silanicus. So again, this species is completely arboreal and found only in the dry zone of the country, mostly in the northern regions. Have also been spotted in places like Hambantota and Nilgala. Right. So now we move on to geckos or the hunas. This is the most diverse group of lizards in this country. Their bodies are covered with small non-overlapping scales, and then they have fixed eyelids. Because their bodies are covered with non-overlapping scales, geckos usually have fleshy bodies compared to other lizards in Sri Lanka. And geckos also lose their tails in defense, right? So they can do this voluntarily, right? Voluntarily. So we call that phenomenon autotomy, caudal autotomy. So once they lose the tail, they can regrow it, right? Geckos lay hard-shelled eggs. So uh, the geckos also have these structures in their fingers, especially the arboreal ones, that allow them to attach to the surface. So of the 62 species in Sri Lanka, we have of the 52, 62 species, 52 are endemic to this country, and they are found in 7 genera. I'll show most of these genera except probably 2 genera. Right. So let's look at the genus Calodactylus, or generally called the ones that are generally called golden geckos. So the genus Calodactylus is found only in India and Sri Lanka. And in Sri Lanka, they're found mostly in the eastern sector of the country, mostly along the Uva region of Sri Lanka. So the other species is found in India. So these are somewhat large geckos ranging from 15 to 25 centimeters in length, and they are all rock or cave dwelling species found in the humid forests of the Uva province of Sri Lanka. So the species that we have in Sri Lanka is Calodactylus ilingodaram, and that is endemic to this country. I mentioned that geckos have like sticky structures that allow them to like walk on, hang on to vertical surfaces. In this particular species, it's really ornamental, right? It's really pretty like this with a lot of extensible structures, right? And that's Calodactylus. And then we have a group of lizards called the day geckos. This is the most diverse genus of geckos in Sri Lanka. As their name suggests, they are mostly diurnal, being active during daytime. Even maybe you could also say they are crepuscular. So they're characterized by having a round pupil. Unlike all the other geckos in Sri Lanka, these are characterized by the round pupil. So they're quite small. Right? These geckos do not grow beyond 6 to 10 centimeters in length, except 2 species that slightly exceed that length. So these guys are arboreal, terrestrial, and some of them are even ground dwelling. So these geckos are known to be involved in communal nesting, something that we say that when several females use the same nesting site to lay eggs. Right? So 40 species, and all of them are endemic to this country. Right? These are some of the species that we described between 2019, 2020, and 2012. So some species, the males of certain species have extremely bright ventral colors. So we have no idea why that is. We've never seen them displaying these colors to females for attraction, but only the males have them. So it seems like a sexual characteristic, but we actually do not know the functionality of this. So these the 6 species that I've shown here, which got us into trouble in 2019 after we named them in the honor of national heroes. We had a lot of pressure coming from the government agencies asking us to change the name, but it's impossible once we have named them according to zoological International Code of Zoological Nomenclature. We cannot name them unless somebody found these geckos to be scientifically invalid. You cannot change the name. So anyway, we want to honor the national heroes, the specific heroes that who are not even recognized by most people. So that is why we named them. So naming or putting a name to an organism actually, in my opinion, is honorable. I have been like, there's a lizard named after me, so I that as an honor, as an honor. Right? So anyway, let's move on. And then we have a group of lizards belonging to the genus Certodactylus. We have 8 species in this country. And there's a particular group that are completely arboreal, and they're quite large. And these geckos can be seen on trees, on large boulders, and they are nocturnal. Extremely strong geckos, in my opinion, because they've bitten me, and then the bite is extremely painful because they are quite large, and their heads are also really large. So we have 6 species in Sri Lanka, all of which are endemic to this country. And then in the same genus, we have another group that are found only on the ground. So these are terrestrial or ground-dwelling pseudodactylus. So one of them, so both species are endemic to this country. Pseudodactylus triodrus is a very pretty gecko, in my opinion. Dark blue to purple color with yellow spots, and you can find them in the humid forest of this country, mostly in the wet zone. And then we have Pseudodactylus yakuna. So it's again a really pretty gecko, found only in the dry zone of the country. So yeah, right. And then we have this particular species, the 4-clawed house gecko. So if you look around, this is one of the most commonest geckos in this country, found almost in all the houses in the country. Sadly, a picture that I have inset in this particular picture in the slide is not nicely visible. So as their name suggests, they have like 5 fingers. Only 4 of them have claws. Right? The innermost finger does not have a claw. So if you see a gecko with a carrot-shaped tail with a very smooth body, that is Gehyra mutilata, or the 4-clawed house gecko. Right? So when you get a free time, just look around. I'm sure you'll see that. Right, and then we have another genus called Hemidactylus. Again, several species are found inside houses. Of the 6 species, of the 9 species, 4 species are endemic to this country. Hemidactylus pavimaculatus is another species that is found inside houses. It's quite common inside houses as well. Just like Gehyra mutilata, you could see both of them almost together, right? So pavimaculatus has an extremely rough or a coarse type of body. The ones you find inside houses are light colored. You can also find them outside houses. They are usually dark in color. And then the largest gecko in Sri Lanka is also a member of this genus. So Hemidactylus hune, which you can see on one of my students' hand. That's Ashan, one of my students from the Rajarata University, who was really happy to see this gecko in the Ukuwela province of this country. So that is the largest gecko in this country, which grows up to almost, along with the tail, almost 30 centimeters, even slightly more than that, maybe about 35 centimeters. All right, and what we have on the bottom is Hemidactylus leishonaldi, or the bark gecko. It's again a dry zone species, a very beautiful kind of gecko, found only in the dry and the intermediate zones of Sri Lanka. Right, okay. So now we're done with geckos. I'm going to move to skinks, or the Hicadallas. So these lizards are characterized by the absence of a distinct neck, and they are, of course, the most distinctive feature is the extremely shiny body. It's all because they have extremely smooth scales, so that has given them a shiny appearance. Like geckos, they lose their tails voluntarily, but then the tails can be regrown. So most of them have tiny limbs compared to their body size. So we have 34 species, of which 28 are found only in this country. And 3 genera, Chalcidoceps, Lanka skinkers, and Nesia, are found only within this country. So let's look at some of them quickly. So this is Chalcidoceps. It's a skink with an extremely elongated body, a very long tail, and tiny limbs, as you can see in the picture, very small limbs. and what I mean by that is proportionately quite small. And then other unique features that they have 4 limbs, all 4 limbs, and the limbs only bear 4 digits or 4 fingers per each limb. Right? So, one of the most important facts about these skinks is that they are found only in the forests of the Knuckles range or Knuckles mountain range. So usually seen above 600 meters in elevation, or in all types of forests in the Knuckles range, except in the highest elevations. So these are for fossorial lizards. So you usually see them under boulders and also among leaf litter, usually under soil. All right. And then this is the only tree going skink in Sri Lanka, which we call the Haley's tree skink. It's a pretty lizard, pretty skink with a white or a olive color body with black stripes or blotches. So it's an entirely arboreal lizard, occasionally coming to the ground, probably to move from one tree to the other tree. So it's again a species that is found only in the lowland dry zone as well as the intermediate zone. It's an endemic species. Right. So then we have a group of skinks called the sun skinks. So this is one of the most so one of the species. This particular species, Eutrophis lankae, is the one that is most commonly seen in home gardens of this country. So we have 7 species in Sri Lanka, and 5 species are endemic to this country. Right? So all are terrestrial. So Eutrophis lankae is the one that is very that is well known among the skinks. So what I have here in the right side, bottom right corner is Eutrophis bibroni, one of the most unique skinks in Sri Lanka. So as you can see, there's this particular lizard is unique because they have a transparent, their lower eyelid is transparent. Right? So that enables this skink to show a unique behavior. So this skink is found in the extremely sandy areas of the country, usually in the northern dry zone, places like Mullaitivu and Chundikulam. So what they do is when they are threatened, they just bury in the very quick sand, very smooth sand, and then like swim within the sand. So I call this a sand swimming skink. That's what I call it, because it's really, really difficult to catch them. They are very fast. And the coolest thing is that they like bury themselves under in sand and then just swim through that. Right? So this skink was not seen for almost 75 years until we found it in Chundikulam in 2017. So, it's not a rare skink in that particular region. The reason that it was not seen for almost 75 years is because of the civil war that was there in the region. So it was mostly inaccessible for herpetologists. So that could be the reason, right? So now we look at the Lanka skinkus genus, or the litter skinks, which are commonly known as. So we have 10 species. These skinks are not very large. The largest could be about 12 centimeters in length, but most of the others are around 5 to 6 centimeters in length, the total length, right? So so as their name suggests, they are endemic. The entire genus is endemic to this country. So in most of them, the males are slightly colorful compared to their females. I'll talk about this later on, right? Right, and then these are of all skinks. These are my favorite. These the members of the genus Nesia. So they're called snake skinks. So we have 9 species of them. So just as their name suggests, they look like snakes because they have extremely reduced or extremely tiny limbs, or some of them have completely lost their limbs, right? However, I suppose that they should be having pelvic and pectoral girdles like other lizards. So we need to do a proper scanning or an X-ray and see whether they actually have those at all. So like snakes, they have extremely elongated bodies. Uh, uh, but then if you look carefully, you could see the external ear opening, and then they also have movable eyelids. Right? So these are burrowing lizards. So they can easily burrow in loose soil. Um, and so it seems like the loss of limbs is mostly due to their burrowing behavior. Right? Right, and then we have the supple skinks or the rayapa. This is again not a very rare skink in this country. It's present in most gardens. Most of you have probably have seen the babies or the juveniles, which are characterized by this extremely red color tail. Right? So it seems like not only in this particular species, several other species in the world, the juveniles have these extremely bright colored tails. It's most likely that again, it's a deceptive strategy to avoid predation, because predators might, of course, directly target the bright colored regions of the body, and then, of course, losing the tail is not a problem for these skinks. So we have two species of this type of skinks, the supple skinks. So only one is endemic to this country. And then again, they are characterized by their extremely elongated bodies. So I'm sure people from Colombo, even in Kandy and all over the island, these skinks are there in your garden if you look carefully, even under flower pots. Right? Right, and then we move on to the monitor lizards, right? So we have two species. So monitor lizards are the largest lizards on Earth. So the largest species is the Komodo dragon, which is found in two islands in Indonesia, the Komodo Island, and there's another small island. In Sri Lanka, also they're the largest lizard. The water monitor, the Kaburgoa, is the largest of them all, growing up to at least 2 meters in length, and also the heaviest. So water monitor, as the name suggests, it's mostly associated with water, and they're really good swimmers. And then, yeah, the water monitor has yellow spots. The juveniles are really pretty, like the one you see on the top picture here, with bright yellow spots. But when they grow old, the colors fade, as the one you see on the left bottom. And the Thalagoya is a terrestrial species, but unfortunately in this picture it's somewhere close to water, but that's not the usual behavior, but then they can tolerate water. Right? So all of these are, of course, carnivorous lizards, but then both are known to also feed on carrion as well. Right. So, and then we have the wall lizards. These are, of course, quite rarely seen type group of lizards in this country. They are again characterized by having somewhat larger bodies, but then they do not have shiny scales like the skinks, but they resemble skinks a lot, right? But then the appearance is not that shiny. And then the limbs are also somewhat bigger. And they also have, just like Eutropis bibroni that I mentioned earlier, they also have a transparent lower eyelid. So we have two species in Sri Lanka. They belong to the genus Ophisops. So what I have here is Ophisops lesionorti. Right. So with this, I conclude my section on the diversity of lizards in Sri Lanka. So now I move on to a small section on the origins of lizards in Sri Lanka. Right? So when I want to talk about origins, so these are the questions that we usually raise. So questions such as, from where have the lizards of Sri Lanka come from? If they have come from somewhere, when did they come to Sri Lanka? And I mean, it doesn't always have to be that they have to come from somewhere else. Have lizards evolved in Sri Lanka, right? And if so, what are the processes that have caused that have led to the evolution of lizards in Sri Lanka? So those are the questions that we usually try to answer when we talk about the origins of lizards in Sri Lanka. So I'm going to take some examples that have actually answered these questions. So one study is the origins of the genera Leucocephalus, Cofortis, Ceratophora, and of course Autocryptis and Sitana. So the latter three the former three genera, Leucocephalus, Cofortis, and Ceratophora, interestingly seem to have a Sunda origin. Right? So when I say a Sunda origin, it most likely suggests that they have an origin from the Sunda Islands, including the islands of Sumatra, Borneo, and Java. So those are the Sunda Islands, including the southern peninsula, southern Thai Malay Peninsula. So those are the Sunda regions. So interestingly, we have no idea how they got here from those areas. So it seems like during the continental drift, India initially touched these islands, right? And then they got to Indian subcontinent, and then also got to Sri Lanka. But for some reason, they seem to have the ones who got to India, they came also colonized Sri Lanka, but then somehow, for some reason, they became extinct in India, right? So this is what the DNA data or the phylogenetic analysis suggests. So that is the only rational explanation we can come up with, right? So there are reasons for a lot of species to undergo extinction in India. So one of them is a meteor crash that happened in the late. I'm not sure about the exact time period, but then a meteor crash has caused volcanic eruptions in the Indian continent, leading to many extinctions. And so it's probably could be one of the reasons why we don't have close relatives of Leucocephalus, Cofortis, and Ceratophora in India. So yeah, so this is a study that was done by Jesse Grisma in 2016. So however, Autocryptis and Sitana seems to have an Indian origin. So which means that their closest relatives are also found in India. Right, and then hemidactylus geckos. Study done by Aparna Lajmi and Praveen Karant in 2020 indicated that hemidactylus geckos have colonized Sri Lanka at least 8 multiple times, right? 8 separate times between 18 to 8 million years ago. Right? I'm not sure why this is a pencil mark on the slide. I didn't do that. Right. So hemidactylus geckos have come to Sri Lanka, or else colonized Sri Lanka from India at least 8 separate times between 18 million years ago to 8 million years ago. And then one of the most interesting things that we came across recently was the analysis of DNA from Nesia and Chalcidoceps, 2 endemic genera. So that revealed that their closest relatives, right, the closest relatives of Nesia and Chalcidoceps are found in Seychelles, right? So that baffled us. And also it showed us that the common ancestor of Chalcidoceps and Nesia and their closest relatives in Seychelles separated approximately 55 million years ago. But when you move back in time, if you look at the position of Seychelles and Sri Lanka and India, it seems that there was a land connection 65 million years ago, a late Cretaceous period. So we are finding it hard to explain whether this is an indication of what we call Gondwanan vicariants, where these are all part of Gondwana, ancient Gondwana land, right? Where Madagascar, India, Sri Lanka, Seychelles, Africa, and even South America, and even Australia were together, which started separating in the early Cretaceous period about 75 million years ago. Right. So this was done in collaboration. This study was done in collaboration with my colleague, my good friend Aniruddha Datta Roy. We haven't published this yet. We would soon be submitting it to a particular journal quite soon. Right. So, and then we also wanted to see the origins of the sun skinks or the Eutropius genus in Sri Lanka. So that study was done by one of my students at the Rajaraja University, Thilni Nirath. So we again used a molecular phylogenetic approach. So her findings indicated that sun skins again colonized Sri Lanka from multiple times between 18 million years ago to 1 million years ago. And interestingly, certain colonization events have led to in situ speciation. So what I mean by this, that when a particular common ancestor of a particular group of species, when they colonize Sri Lanka, they have undergone speciation within the country, right? So that is what we mean by in situ speciation. So, so multiple times, at least about 5 times, 6 times, Eutropius skinks have colonized the island from India, right? So all indicate that Eutropius have come to Sri Lanka from India, not from anywhere else, right? So, and at the same time, I wanted to see the litter skinks, how what their origins are. So again, if you look at when I examined their phylogenetic relationships, that indicated that they also have Indian origins, but then the entire genus have undergone speciation within the country during the last 25 to 10 million years. So it seems that the common ancestor of all Lanka skink species colonized Sri Lanka from India about 30 million years ago. So the reason for speciation within the country has mostly been driven by mountain zone isolation, right? So what I mean by this is that certain populations getting isolated on mountain tops, and then they have evolved, they've evolved to become distinct species. So again, this study has not been published yet, which I'm planning to publish at least this year, hopefully. Right. And then we have been studying the diversity and origins of the day geckos, the smallest geckos in Sri Lanka, for the last 3 years. That resulted in the description or the discovery of almost 13 species of day geckos within the country. So when we look at their phylogenetic analysis done separately by Ishan Agarwal in India, and then again by us several times, have shown that day geckos have once colonized Sri Lanka from India, and then surprisingly from Sunda regions. Right? We are again surprised by this finding, but then that indicates that the colonization from India, Sunda region or the Southeast Asian islands, seem to be quite recent, right? So we have no idea, no way of explaining this relationship or this finding, because there was no recent connection to the Sunda region between Sri Lanka and those regions in the recent times. So we are still baffled by that. But then both colonizations, either from India and the Sunda regions, have resulted in speciation, rapid speciation events within the country. So the pattern that we see is that the most of the diversity is seen in the dry zone isolated mountains, like you see here in this picture, mountains with a lot of granitic boulders seem to be serving as refugia for these species, and the thing is that you don't see one species that is found in one mountain to be present in another mountain, right? So the two species, what we see are two different species into these two different in different mountains in the dry zone of this country. So seems like the dry mountains in the dry zone have served as as a speciation pump for these species. So these studies, along with the discovery of new species, were led by my collaborator, Suranjan Karunaratne. So we have been working together since 2019 on this particular project. Right, so you might wonder how these species from India got to Sri Lanka, right? So it's simply they walked, right? So how come? Because there's no land bridge between Sri Lanka and India. So when we look at the geological history of this world, there were phases that we called low sea level phases, right? Where the sea level suddenly decreases for long periods of time. So when the sea level decreases, the low-lying areas between India and Sri Lanka connected. Right? So what we see in the gray color is the 30-meter contour, 120-meter contour line. So if the sea level decreases below 120 meters, so all these area, the gray color becomes land. Right? So in the Pleistocene era, that is the most recent time Sri Lanka was, there was a low sea level period which connected India to Sri Lanka. So in the Pleistocene, the sea levels dropped to 120 meters below current levels. So that connected Sri Lanka and India for the last time. And then it allowed faunal, what we call faunal exchange, the movement of fauna between the between the two land masses. But this is not the only time that Sri Lanka was connected to India. Several times before also, maybe like 20 million years ago, or in the Cenozoic as well as the Mesozoic, Sri Lanka and India seem to have been connected through land bridges during low sea level periods. Right. So that's it with the origins of the lizards of Sri Lanka. I'm going to briefly talk about the natural history of the lizards of Sri Lanka. So again, I'm going to use certain studies that were published recently. The saddest thing is that there's not many studies on the natural history of the lizards of Sri Lanka. Right? So one study I'm going to talk about is the study done by one of my oldest friends, Ruchira Somavira, on the nesting behavior of the day gecko, the Candian day gecko, Nemasphis candianus. So his findings suggest that the females of the gecko seem to be coming to the same nest site during different seasons, and in a particular season, several females will come to that same site to lay eggs. So this is what we call communal nesting, and then these geckos mostly prefer cold, shady, cave-like or boulder environments. All right. So most dragon lizards seem to be territorial. So that was shown to be the case by a study done by one of my colleagues, Suranjan Karunaratne and Tasuna Amarasinghe. So they reported that these the Sri Lanka kangaroo lizards, the Otocryptis vayagmani, seem to be extremely territorial, and then they display their throat sacs or the gula sacs to males to ward off the males coming from other territories. And then if they still proceed, they would start battling with each other, biting and attacking savagely. Right? So that would result in the defeat of a particular individual, and then that defeated individual would be chased away from that territory. So certain skins in this country show these bright colors in their head and the throat regions. So so this is very striking in this particular species, the Lanka skincus fallax. So this is one of the commonest skins in the country. I'm sure almost all home gardens in the country would have this particular species. They are really small, don't go, along with the tail, don't grow below, above 8 centimeters in length. So we wanted to see what is the basis behind this throat coloration. So so I assigned one of my students at the Rajarata University, Ishara Jaman. So his study indicated that only the males have this bright throat coloration. The females do not have that throat coloration. The females will have this pale throat color or white throat color. But males develop this throat color at a particular size or particular age. So usually larger males will have these bright throat coloration. So, and not only that, males seem to have two different throat colors. So one with this red throat color, red, the entire head region is red with white spots. And then another group of males will have black throats with white or blue colored spots. So we were initially not sure whether these species belong to the same species or not. So Ishara, what he initially did was he tested the DNA and he found out that, of course, they all belong to the same species. So then we conducted the other studies which confirmed that the males only developed the throat colors, and the males are polymorphic, and the entire species is sexually dimorphic with the coloration. Right. So then we have this species where I earlier said that all the members of the genus Ceratophora are characterized by their nasal appendages. So one of the studies to test the functionality of the horn or the rostral appendages were carried out by Martin Whiting from Australia, along with my friend Ruchira Somavira. So what they found was they could not find a proper relationship with the rostral appendage, but what they found was that males have a distinct or more bright throat coloration compared to females. And then the throat coloration were far more conspicuous compared to females in males. So apart from anything else, they could not still explain the functionality of the rostral appendage. Right? So there's things that we still don't know about these lizards. Right. And then one of the biggest questions about all animals is that how they survive in altered habitats. So this question was tested by looking at, again, the Tennant's horned lizard, or Ceratophora tennanti, in the Nakas Mountain range. So this was done by, again, my good friend Ruchira. So what they did was they examined the presence of these lizards in different habitats, the cardamom plantations, mixed habitats, like where we have cardamom plantations inside forests, and then of course completely natural habitats. So what they found was the species was more prevalent in mixed habitats, where you also have cardamom plantations as well as cardamom plantations within the forest. Right? So it seems like these type of habitats seem to be favoring these lizards compared to completely cardamom plantations or completely natural habitats. Right. So with that, I conclude my section on the natural history of lizards of Sri Lanka. So finally, I just want to briefly mention about the threats to the lizards of Sri Lanka. So, of the 241 species of lizards in Sri Lanka, there's 108 species are threatened with extinction. So it's almost 50%. So the major threat is the loss of habitats, which has been going on since the colonial times, and it's still going on even in the recent times. So that is the major problem, major threat to the lizards of Sri Lanka. Roadkills are another major threat because a lot of roads cut across major forest habitats in Sri Lanka. So what I have here in the picture is a Ceratophora storati, a gravid female that has been crushed by road traffic in Horton Plains National Park. And another recent threat is the increasing demand in the pet trade, right? So some of you probably have heard about the demand for the kimbulhunas in the recent past. But not only that, there's a huge demand for dragon lizards as well. Species like Leucocephalus has been exported since the 1970s. And in the recent times, Ceratophora, Stodati, and Tennanti are in huge demand, and also Cophotis silanica. Cophotis, both species are in huge demand. So if you can see in the slide, this particular picture of Cophotis species silanica is taken from a website that sells these lizards, right? So a pair of Coforti silianica is priced at $1,350 US. So they're quite expensive. So the biggest issue is that these individuals, these lizards are illegally collected from their natural habitats. So that puts a huge pressure on their natural populations because they are extremely slow breeders. Right? So removing adult individuals from the natural habitat is extremely is a huge problem. So with this, I'm going to conclude my presentation. So as I mentioned earlier, Sri Lanka is a lizard diversity hotspot. So among the lizards, geckos and skinks are the most diverse. So it seems like colonization from India, Southeast Asia, and in situ speciation within Sri Lanka has been the major determinant of lizard diversity in Sri Lanka. So however, natural history studies, behavior, and ecological studies on the lizards of Sri Lanka is a need of the hour. So majority of the lizards in Sri Lanka are of course threatened by extinction. Major threats are habitat loss, road kills, and collection for pet trade. Right, with this, I'd like to thank all of you here, and then also the funders that have enabled my research in this country, and then also the DWC and the Forest Department of Sri Lanka for permitting our studies. And then of course, my colleagues and collaborators and my students who have been a source of inspiration. All right, thank you for listening. So,
Thank you, Kanishka.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kanishka. Thank you very much.
yeah, okay. I can stop sharing the presentation. If you have
Yes.
questions, you can ask.
Yes, that would help now.
Thank you, Dr. Malik.
Thank you.
Dr. Malik. Thank you, Dr. Kanishka, for a very interesting and enlightening presentation. We know so little about these animals, and they're so beautiful and colorful, and they are losing their habitat. So it's a great thing that you are recording and studying them. Thank you very much. Also, thank you to Anushka for the hosting and recording, and all the members of the committee for various for their support. Dr. Malik for his arrangements. Thank you all, and good night.
Am I supposed to answer questions?
I think there are some questions.
Kanishka, yes, I'm speaking with.
Right, yeah.
I'm going to take questions now. Kanishka, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm seeing certain questions which are posted on the chat window.
Yes.
Look at them. Right.
Yeah, one is, what are the importance of lizards other than being a part of the ecosystem?
Of course. Yeah, that's a good question. So lizards, almost all lizards are predators, and then they mostly feed on insects, right? So controlling large population increases of insects, insects that could be pests in human modified habitats, such as agricultural systems, right, is extremely beneficial for human beings, right? So they would very nicely selectively feed on I would say selectively, but they would feed on insects that could be harmful, not only harmful for us, but yeah, pests, of course. Predation on pests is a major benefit by lizards. I would say, silent service done by lizards.
The next question, you have already answered part of it, which is, are there any threatened lizard species in Sri Lanka? You
Yes, yeah,
dealt with that. But then the
almost
next
50%.
next
Yeah.
part of that is, are there any gene conservation projects for these species in Sri Lanka or any other country in the world?
Unfortunately, no. It's only now studies done by my research group, and there's another group in the Sri Javadana University. I'm yet to see their results. But then we are going to like incorporate the findings from our genetic studies into conservation. Like one thing is that we see that in different parts of the country, same species which is widespread, but they are genetically distinct. It doesn't mean that they are different species, but what it's saying is that these are genetically isolated. That could lead to become a different species. In the future, not right now. Uh, um, so the important fact I want to highlight is that when we find genetically distinct populations, our objective is, as conservationists, as evolutionary biologists, is that we want those distinct gene pools or genetically distinct populations to remain as it is. Right? We discourage populations being mixed, individuals from different populations being mixed. So what we are, the word that we are using for this is that distinct conservation management units for those genetically distinct populations. And so we want it to remain separate as it is.
How do house geckos run on the ceiling, and what is the mechanism on their feet that allows this? I think you you showed some slides on that. Huh?
Yes. So the interesting fact is that they've got structures called lamellae underneath their fingers. So when you do these scanning electron micrographs, take scanning electron micrographs, we see that those structures are made from tiny hair-like structures, right? So these tiny microscopic hair-like structures enables these geckos to cling on to the rough surface of the walls, right? So for us it's smooth, but for a gecko that is enough. These tiny microscopic hairs would nicely like move into these like cling on to these rough surfaces. For them it's quite rough. For us it's smooth because of the microscopic structure.
Anything you can say about regrowing broken tails?
That's a good one. When they have their natural tail, they do have the vertebral column. So tail is supplied with the vertebral column. So, but when they lose the tail, the vertebral column does not grow from there onwards. So they would have just a fleshy muscular tail. So in order to facilitate caudal autotomy, so their tails are made of muscle bundles, which we call myomeres. So the way they break their tails is by contracting those muscle bundles and separating them. So as a result, they can voluntarily separate the muscle bundles and then break off the tail. So that is how they avoid predation. So when they want to grow, they have extremely high cell division rate in those at the tips of their tails. So that is how they first grow the tail and develop the muscles later on.
There are two questions that are linked. One is, what is the estimated date of the last lizard link with Southeast Asia? And how is it established that there were several migrations of a particular species from India?
Right.
That's
Okay.
very, very technical. Don't go into a lot of detail.
Right. Okay. So what we do is Dr. Malik, can you repeat the first part of the question?
What is the estimated date of the last lizard link with Southeast Asia?
Right. So, the last lizard link, the most recent one is coming from the geckos. So it's almost about uh, it's about 8 million years ago, right? So it seems like there was a link between the Southeast Asian region 8 million years ago, or the Sunda regions. To be honest, we are not very confident with that finding. We need to look at, we need to study this further. So yeah, so but for agamids or the dragon lizards, it indicates that the recent post connection is around between 35 to 50 million years ago. So again, my hypothesis is that Sri Lanka was not connected to Sunda region. The connection came through India, where the species that lived in India actually went through an extinction. So, so when we look at the phylogenetic relationships, since there are no close relatives in India, so what we find, the relationships we find are only from the ones that are found in Sunda regions. So that could be the reason why we don't get, we get close relationships to species in Sunda region. I hope I answered the question as you wanted.
Yeah, so how was it established that there were several migrations of particular?
Right, that one, right. So again, we looked at the phylogenetic relationships. So what we find is that there are distinct species or separate species being related to species closely with Indian taxa or Indian species. So that is suggestive of independent colonization events from India, right? So we look at the phylogenetic relationships, and then we find that Sri Lankan species are closely related to Indian species. So we, to say that they have several independent colonization events, we find that several distinct species of maybe 4 or 5 species independently related to Indian species. So Indian species. So that is how we come across the idea that independent colonization events have given rise to species in Sri Lanka. So so sometimes there's an indication there's one colonization event, and then after colonization event, that lineage, that group has undergone speciation events within the island. So yeah, so that's another different aspect of the same story. So there's another question, Dr. Malik. Why don't we have Draco in Sri Lanka? To be honest, I don't know, but I wish I wish we had them in Sri Lanka. But the answer for that question is that Dracos seems to be Sunda, mostly a Sunda or Southeast Asian group. So India connected with the mainland Asia again in the Mesozoic for the final time. So that facilitated the movement of Dracos from India so movement from the mainland Asia to India. So probably they came quite late when Sri Lanka was separated from India, probably quite late, maybe 10,000 years ago. So that is why we probably don't have. I'm just speculating things, speculating to explain why we don't have Dracos in Sri Lanka. So the fact is that we don't have them. So most likely they got to Sri Lanka, got to India quite recently when Sri Lanka was already separated from India.
What are Dracos?
Dracos are the flying dragon lizards. So I had a picture of them in one of the phylogenies. So they have extended ribs in their body. So they have a skinny flap on both sides of the body, and then what they do is they jump from one tree, and when they jump, they extend those ribs, extending the skinny or the dermal flap around on the sides of their body, which allows them to glide. So fascinating lizards. Sadly, we don't have them in Sri Lanka.
Like the flying squirrels. The last question, is it true that if you separate a tail from the body of a lizard, another body grows? I don't think that's quite right. I think the tail grows, but not the body.
Only the tail grows back. From the tail, no body grows.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we've had a good lot of questions. Time is also running on. So there are a few announcements. The first one is that the July meeting will be on the 8th, and it will be given by a botanist, renowned botanist, Dr. Magdan Jayasuriya. It's titled The Mysteries of Somavatiya, where he discovered a new forest type in the Mahavali floodplains in Somavati. Another, so we have now reached the end of this meeting. Ninel was going to make